Hey guys, welcome to RTR Radio Basics 101, and this is the new video in our 101 series covering the radios. Now these are the RTR radios, which means they're ready to run, or they're the ones that come with the kit, and they're not all created equal. Now the thing is, this is geared towards new people, so if you're new to the hobby and you just got your radio and you don't know what all the stuff is, this video is geared toward you. We're going to help you understand what all the knobs and switches do. We're going to go over the function of the radio, how to set it up in the car so everything's working properly to get you up and running. This video should be pretty informative. Here we go. Okay, so let's get right into this. We'll get you right down on the bench and we'll begin going through this right now. Okay, so here are our four radios. We're going to start with the SLT3. This is a Spectrum radio, and this comes with the newer ARMA cars, the 3S stuff and all that. This is the XP120, and this comes with a lot of the associated stuff, and it's got a lot more gadgets on it, so we'll go over that one here in a little bit. This is the SX2, and this one came with the earlier versions of some of the ARMA 6S cars and the 3S cars. Pretty good radio, but it's got a really big disconnect between the radio and the car. We'll go over that shortly. And then this is the standard Traxxas radio, and that's the Tqi. And that's pretty much a basic radio for all of the Traxxas cars, unless you have one that has more channels and things like that on it. So this is a basic radio here. And this one actually has the link module in it, and this is an add-on feature. So this link module right here allows you to connect it to your phone and do some cool stuff in your phone with it, but we're not going to cover that in this video. That's more of an advanced feature. We're going to go over the basics of what this radio is and what all the switches and knobs do on that one. So that's a basic rundown of each one as far as what they are. Let's start with the SLT3, and that's this little guy right here. And this comes with the newer ARMA stuff. This one is, it works. I'll give you that. It does work. For me, it just feels a little awkward in the hand, but I believe I'm getting used to it. I haven't had one of these fail yet, and the range is good on it, and the speed between the radio and the car is also good. So for being an RTR radio, this one actually functions pretty well. I was a little hard on it when it first came out, but I'm growing to like it, which is a good thing. Now on the back here, you've got this is what's called a power cutoff switch, and it's got a 50, a 75, and a 100 right here. So what that is if you flip the switch down to 50, you'll get half the power sent to the car, which limits the speed of the vehicle. As you learn with your car, you can kick it up to 75%, and that'll give you a little more power, a little more speed out of your car. And when you kick it up to 100%, you get full power and everything. And you've got the power knob right here. This is how you turn it on. So this knob in the back is what you do to turn this on. When you turn these on, make sure to turn on the transmitter first. That's this one. Then turn on the car. If you turn the car on first, it's open to radio frequency, and that could be a bad thing. You can get runaways. You can have all kinds of weird problems. Make sure to turn this on first. Make sure to turn this off last. Car, turn on, turn the car off, then turn this off. This is the throttle trim, so this sets forward and backward for the car. So when you pull the trigger, if the car goes backward and you're trying to go forward, you'll flip that to the other direction to correct that. And I'll show you in a little bit what the downside to that is and how to correct it, especially if you've got a brushless system. So we'll set this back. This is your steering. Same deal here. If you turn the wheel to the right, but they turn left in the car, you want to reverse this switch here. That will let you turn right when you plan to turn right. So that's what that's for. It'll change the direction of the servo's throw, and I'll show you that in a little bit as well. Now on the other side of this, you actually have your trim knobs, and there's two of these, and then you have a variable knob here, and I'll explain that in a second. First, you have your trim knobs. So as far as the one that's marked ST, that's steering. So the ST knob, if you don't touch the steering wheel and give it just a little throttle, just a little bit of throttle, the car will creep away from you. If it doesn't go straight, you can use this knob to straighten it out. Turn a little to the right to make it turn right, a little to the left, and so on. And you'll be able to get your car to track true. Once you get it to track true, then you can start with some speed. On the other hand, the other one is throttle. And if you set your car down and it tries to creep away from you, or it's grunting, You want to wiggle this around until you find 0. In other words, give it a little throttle, it rolls, let off, and it rolls till it stops. That's where you want to find center. That finds neutral for the car. Now, with the trigger, the way that works is pull is throttle, that's forward. Push is brakes. Now, the way that works, it's a 2-stage system. So throttle, brakes. Now, if you want to go backwards, push the brakes again. If the car's stopped, it'll go backwards. It won't. If you have a brushless system, it won't do it while you're rolling forward. The speed control and the motor talk to each other, and if it is creating current, it won't go backwards until the car stops. So it's not, if you're not getting it to back up real quick, that's because brushless systems generally don't do that unless it's a sensored system, and most of them aren't unless you're into crawlers and things like that. For the most part, they are not a sensored system, so you have to stop the car and then back up. Then we have the last dial here, and this is a steering rate dial, and what it does is it allows you to choose how far the front wheels will turn when you're at maximum steering. It's basically a dual rate knob, but it only has one for the steering. So what it is if you turn the dial all the way to one side and you hear the car grunting in the servo, you can back this off some, and as you back it off, it'll make it turn less and less and less until you hit maximum. So what this does is this will allow you to set it so you don't burn your servo up. And like I said, we'll go over all that with the live demonstration shortly. Now, that's the basics of this radio. It does have another channel unit right here, and I have an RC that actually uses channel 3, and it's got a brake to the rear wheels, so you just touch that and it locks the rear wheels, but don't be on the throttle when you do it because it'll overload the system. So this can be used for separate channels, off and on, just like that. So that's a channel 3, and on most of the cars, that's not used. Now we're getting into some interesting radios, and this one from Team Associated is the XP120, and this is a pretty basic radio. We've had good and bad luck with these radios, but at the same time, it does have a lot more controls in it. Now, when you turn it on, and the switch is on the back here for turning it on, when you turn it on, there's an indicator light right here that'll turn red, and it'll flash if your batteries are low, so you can look right at it and tell whether you've got good radio signal. Your reversing for your throttle and your steering are right there, and of course that changes the direction of the servo and what the speed control will do. Also, you have throttle and steering trim on this side. These are the trims, so you can set on the steering, you can set your car to drive straight, and on the throttle you can set neutral. Pretty straightforward there, and this is the dual rates. And dual rates work like endpoints. They can adjust how far something will go. And we have a video that will be right up here. We'll have a link to that showing you what the dual rates go, how they work, and all that cool stuff. So this is the basics of this radio here. So now we have the STX2, and initially I liked this radio. I thought it was a pretty good radio. A lot of my friends have this one, and this one has basically the same layout as this one as far as these are your adjustments for forward and reverse on your servos and your throttle. This is your trims right here, so you've got your throttle and steering trims along this line on it, and then down here you have your dual rates, and that is what we talked about earlier, where this will be like endpoints. You can turn things to where they'll turn farther or less. I recommend checking out the dual rate video when you get there. The on switch is right back here on the bottom, and that's pretty much it. It's a pretty straightforward radio, and a lot of them are this way. Not all of them have the dual rate system in them, but that's not overly necessary a lot of the time. Sometimes the multifunction switch will allow you to set the endpoints on your steering and whatnot if it's not used on something else, or you're not connected to a phone or all that high-tech stuff. These basic radios generally get the job done. However, this one is not a favorite of mine. I've got some friends that really like this radio, but I don't care for this one because there's a pretty good disconnect between the car and the radio. So when you turn this on and you're running, what happens is, if you give it some steering, there's a little bit of a delay before the wheels actually turn, and it's not the servo, it's the radio system itself. There's lag between the two, and that causes issues with trying to, like if you're trying to hit a ramp or go through a certain area, you have to think ahead of your car just a little bit so you can get the car to do what you want it to, and that makes this one just a little bit more difficult to run, but it does function. And if you've never run a high-end radio, this will seem pretty normal to you, but you can definitely do better. The next radio we're going to go after is the Tqi, or the top qualifier, and this is a Traxxas radio. And this one has some pretty interesting features on it. There's nothing on the back except the link module, and most of them don't come with this, or at the time of filming they didn't. So this one has a basic multifunction knob, and it'll do many different things depending on the car you have it in and whether that car has active vehicle control or not, which is it has a gyro in it that allows it to help itself around a corner. If you don't have that, that works more like a dual rate system, which allows you to control how far your tires will turn. Your trim is right here on this. It does have a self-right button, so if you have, say, the Traxxas Max, you can push and hold this button, the car will rock back and forth if it's on asphalt and try and get back on its wheels. And then you have a menu button here. Pretty straightforward stuff there. There's not a lot extra in this one. They're really basic in my opinion, unless you have this module, which gives you the chance to do some finer tuning on it. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward radio. All the standard rules apply with brakes and throttle and all that. So that's the Tqi radio from Traxxas. All right, it's time for the demonstration, and in this demonstration we're going to use the Centon 4x4 from Arma, and this is a version 1, and it came with, yes, you guessed it, the STX2. I may not be a fan of this one as far as how it reacts and stuff, but it is perfect for showing you all the stuff that these things generally do out of the box, and it doesn't matter whether you get a Red Cat or you get, you know, a Traxxas or an Arma. Function is function, and this will cover all the basics. So we're going to get you down on the bench, and we're going to connect this up, and we're going to get the car running. We'll take the body off, and we'll go through all the setup on this. We'll go ahead and neutralize everything and show you how to set it up from scratch so you can safely do this without hurting yourself. Now, when you do go to start your car for the first time, you want to get it off the ground. That's just how that needs to be done. Get some tires and wheels under it, get it on some boards, a 4x4, whatever you can put it on, to get those tires and wheels off the ground, because if you plug it in, turn it on, and turn this on and it's set wrong, it can take off and get away from you, and that's not a good thing. So let's get down on the bench and we'll get started. Okay, so we've got the battery connected here and we're good to go, but we did switch a couple of things on the car, and what we did here is we wired the motor backwards, and what it is there's 3 wires here on a brushless motor, and that's these 3 right here. And these 3 wires can be hooked up in any order. It's not a big deal. But if you pull the trigger on it, and let's go ahead and turn things on here. So the indicator lights are on, the radio is functioning. Car is on, nice. Okay, so what it is if you pull the trigger, then the car's going backwards. Now these are rolling backwards, and I'm trying to go forward, like so. Okay, that you would immediately think that you need to switch this over to reverse. Now, whenever you change from one to the other, you have trimming issues, so you'll have to dial your trim down. But before you do that, this is set up the same way as when I turned it on. And if you notice, pulling the trigger is backwards. Now, the thing is, if you push and nothing happens, and you push again and something happens, pushing is brakes. First one is pushing, so you can pull it forward. Wheels are spinning backwards. Brakes. Okay, let's do that again. Okay, one more. Now, the fact that you have to push twice here lets you know that this is set up correctly, and you've got an error over here on your motor. So we'll take a second here and we'll switch those back. There we go. And it's just a matter of reconnecting these the right way. Now, not all of these motors are color-coded. And like I say, it's not a big deal. There we go. It's not a big deal if you hook them up a different way, because the way these things operate, it won't hurt the system. So there we go. Now we're hooked up color-coded, but those were color-coded correctly. So that's a good thing there. Turn the radio back on. And the car. There we go. So now when we pull the trigger, it goes forward. Brakes, reverse. So it was actually a wiring issue on the motor, not the radio. However, if you switch it, notice how it's moving? That's where trim comes into play. So if you turn the trim all the way to one side, I get nothing that way because that's reverse. Turning to the left, now it'll creep. See how that works? So what you're trying to find is neutral here. Now the thing about neutral is when you do this, you may get, so if we set it this way, here we go, to where it's just barely not creeping, like so. So now it's working backwards still because we reversed it. Okay, so we'll switch it back, and now we'll have to set this. There we go. Now see how it's just barely logging in like that? Back it off a little bit. Throttle. Brakes. The brakes were kind of weak on that. And reverse is really slow. So you want to find a sweet spot in there where you can get your brakes easy. So tuning this is finding the area between reverse and forward so the car will sit there when you want it to, but it'll also respond when you need it to. Okay, so let's go into steering now. And I like to do the throttle first just so I can get the car to sit still before I play with the steering. But on the steering here, if you turn the steering wheel to the right, notice how those turn to the left. That's backwards. Okay, that's not a good thing. So we want to go ahead and go to steering, ST right here for steering, and turn it the other direction. Now it turns the right direction. And the thing about that is you still have trim. So if this thing isn't pointing straight ahead, and these are always towed out a little bit, but if it's not pointing straight ahead, use the steering trim knob to make the wheels point forward so the car will run true. That's a real important bit right there. You want to make sure that your car, when it's running, drives straight away from you when you're not touching the wheel. That gets you the best control out of it. Now the thing about that is, this one down here is the steering rate knob. And what that does is, if we turn this all the way down, okay, so the car is going to turn as far as I can get it to turn with the rate down. Okay, so check this out. That's as far as it turns. Okay, you can't hear any noises. That's as far as it turns. But as I turn this knob up, see how it goes farther and farther? Listen to this. Hear it grinding? It's not really grinding, it's grunting. That's the motor in the servo. If you can hear the motor in the servo when you're all the way to one side, you're pulling too hard against it. So listen again, and I'll trim this back until the sound stops. There we go. So now I still get full steering, but when I'm holding it all the way to one side like this, it's not trying to burn up the servo. If you have the servo pulling too hard against the physical stops in the car, it creates heat in the motor, and the motor will burn out eventually. So when you set these up, make sure you don't overdrive these with pressure on the servo. That's what this steering rate knob, or the dual rate for the steering, is. Now, there's one more item on here that I want to show you, and it's the one at the bottom. Now that the car is set up properly, everything's working. We showed you this demonstration at 75%. But if you kick it down to 50%, you're going to lose a little bit of your brakes and a little bit of your throttle. So I'm going to hold the car. Notice how it didn't brake real hard, and I'm not getting reverse. That means we need to change the trim a little until we get reverse. There it is. So I had to trim this more towards the brakes to get the brakes to work. You think when you kick it down to 50% and your car doesn't work, or you're not getting any brakes or reverse in 100%, go to your trim knob first. That's where it's really going to shine, is on the trim knob. Now the thing about it is, we're at 50%, but we didn't have our throttle rate or dual rate turned up. Now check it out. So it's functioning properly, it's just slow. So we kick it up to 75% again, and here we go. Got a lot more snort to it, and it's going to go a lot faster. The brakes are stronger, the throttle, the grunt, it's all stronger when you hit 75%. Now we pump it up to 100%, and the throttle rate is full blast. Here we go again. Check this out. See how fast the wheels stop? That's because you get more brakes and more throttle. So, and then reverse. Oh, looks like we got to set our trim. There we go. So I had to adjust this until I had throttle and brakes and reverse. So just because you can find a spot where this will sit on the ground and not move doesn't mean you have it adjusted right to get your reverse and your forward. This is where you have to find that happy medium on the throttle side. So now it's functioning just like that. And that is the beauty of these knobs here, which aren't on a lot of the radios. But this one with the 50, 75, and 100%, that is a great learning tool because you can start low, finish high. It's a beautiful thing. All right, so there you go, RTR Radio Basics 101. I hope this instruction was helpful. You know, it's one of those things to where when you've been in the hobby as long as we have, and everybody around here, we've been doing this a really long time. Not all of us. It's nice to have new people, but most of us have been doing this a really long time, and you take this kind of thing for granted. We've seen so many different radios out there and all that stuff that we just assume people understand. But if you're new to the hobby and this is something that you haven't experienced before, reading through a worded manual can be kind of difficult to relate to how the car and the radio is supposed to be set up. That's what the 101 series is geared towards, is helping new people understand the hobby they're in. You know, this has been a lot of kind of an eye-opening thing for me as well, because we've had to go and look up a couple of items for the radios to make sure that we knew what we were talking about here. Do we know everything? Absolutely not. But we try and share the stuff that we do know. Don't forget to bash that like button and help our content spread. You know, that helps more than you could possibly know. It helps the algorithm let our stuff spread to people that need this instruction. You know, we're not the only instructors out here doing this, but you know, if you learn something from it, it was worth the effort. This video was a long time in the making, and we are planning another one for more advanced users on some of the more advanced radios. And that one's going to be a little time putting together because there's so much involved in each one of those. If you have anything you'd like to add to this video, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below and help others along the way. Hey guys, I'm AJ with AJ Jam Studios saying, keep bashing guys.